Guys, you're listening to What's the Hazard? I'm Doug Fletcher. This is my guest, Gabriel Glynn, and you are the co-founder, CEO of MakUSafe.
Yeah.
Which is a company that I became aware of probably a year and a half or so ago.
Okay.
It was actually through our Encore Safety Network, this collaboration that we do with Ellerbrock Norris in town here. And Tom had come over and done a few of those programs, and I listened and was fascinated by the technology. And I'm not a tech guy, but I'm smart enough to know that there's going to be technology. It appears that some of this stuff is going to have to happen. I tried to ignore it, like I took my first computer class in college, 1979, maybe something like that. Fortran, punch cards,
big size of
exactly.
A room.
Yeah. And I thought, this is never going to catch on, man. So I didn't even bother to learn computer stuff. So, by the time I had to actually use a computer, I was so far behind. But I think technology is, I guess, inevitable.
Yeah, and it's supposed to make our lives easier.
Yes. Well,
we were talking about it just a little bit ago about, I've made my home a smart home, right? And got all the different gadgets, the lights that turn on, my coffee maker. I can just tell Alexa whenever I wake up in the morning, just start my coffee, and she starts my coffee, and all of these conveniences. And then the internet goes out and my whole darn house doesn't work.
What do we do, Dad?
I gotta go and unplug my smart plug and just plug it into the regular plug all this stuff. There
is a certain inevitability to that, I think, too. I can remember 20 years ago going to Home Depot or one of the big box hardware stores, and their computer system would be down. You couldn't check out. And I thought, this is going to be the downfall of our society, this dependence. And, who knew? But anyway, thank you for coming.
Thanks for having me.
First and foremost, man.
Yeah,
you had to drive over from Des Moines.
It was a beautiful morning.
I love driving, and I like morning drives when the weather's nice like this.
It's better for me because I'm going east to west in the morning, so the sun's at my back.
Yeah,
if you're going our way, then you're just driving right into that bright sun.
Yes.
So no, it was a
I've
great
done
drive.
that too. I haven't had that experience, but I appreciate your coming. I love the company. I love what you're doing. You can talk about the technology and a little bit about the origin story of the company. You're not a safety guy.
No.
But one of the applications of your technology is safety. And I wouldn't think it's the exclusive application. The more I look at what you do, it seems like there's a lot of application to it, but there is a piece that relates to safety. So if you wouldn't, I know you've told the story 1,000 times, if not more, but would you give us just a little bit about MakUSafe and how it started? And
yeah, I appreciate it. It's interesting, when we use the term safety guy or safety professional, I think about it, we're people. We care about people. Right? People who care about people is really maybe a better title for it.
Totally.
Because safety is an element of that, and it's an important element of that, but it's really more about how do we take care of our fellow man.
Of course.
Right? And
agreed.
I kind of my journey into this is, I mentioned my father was kind of my first mentor as a young man, and he worked in a factory, third shift. So my mom was a stay-at-home mom, 4 kids. My dad worked third shift building printing presses. So talk about technology that goes out of style. Yeah. So there was a company in Cedar Rapids called Goss, and they made newspaper printing presses for newspapers, magazines, things like that. And then around the late 90s, when everybody started using phone, internet, all that kind of stuff, and everything moved online, the company went bankrupt. And so my father, after 20 years of working overnight to support a family of 6, found himself showing up, and the gate was locked, and they said, you don't have a job, go home. Yeah. And so at that time, he was a high school grad. And you can imagine being 20 years into a career with a high school degree or high school diploma. What are you going to do? And he got the idea that he wanted to impact safety. And so went to school, got a degree in safety, and then became a safety manager. And for the last 20 years of his career, before he retired about a year and a half ago, he managed safety. And so, it was interesting. I remember some of the early memories I have of being able to go visit him at the factory. And of course, this is way back before there was a lot of focus on safety and OSHA and regulation and things like that. to where things are at today and the advancements that have been made today in safety. And so really a lot of this was inspired by him and trying to find a way to help my father work smarter, to be more proactive. And I think that was the biggest epiphany for me when I ended up going down the road of chasing this opportunity of trying to improve that, was realizing that a lot of the safety industry is reactive. It's getting better, and conversations that I hear on this podcast and conversations that I hear in real life when I go visit sites, we're making that move. But for the longest time, everything was wait for something bad to happen, figure out why it happened, and try to prevent it from happening again.
Right, exactly.
And then wait for something bad to happen again, so you can move on to the next thing. And so the idea clicks of why can't we just
failure-driven projects?
Yeah, like why can't we just not have something bad happen and be able to see it ahead of time? And so that was really the vision behind it, was can we create technology that allows us to see a little bit into the future so that we can try to be more proactive in the way that we manage workplace safety. And that was really the impetus of MakUSafe.
So you had some, you've been an entrepreneur. You described yourself kind of as a serial entrepreneur in the article that I read this morning at 4:45, which I thought was really interesting. And so you had a technology background to some degree, and then you saw this problem or this opportunity and developed a way to apply technology to that assessment ability, as you said, kind of a proactive approach to making these observations and determinations. So the technology is a wearable technology. Can you talk a little bit about the actual MakUSafe product and what it does and how it works?
Yeah. If it's okay, I'll jump back a little bit to like the entrepreneurial side of things. So my first job, we moved into a new neighborhood, and I think I was 8 or 9 years old. And my mom gets a phone call one day from one of the neighbors, and she said, "Hey, did you know your son is out taking rocks out of people's landscaping and then selling them back to us?" Well, so my mom's horrified, right? It's a brand new neighborhood, right? And this was a step up for us. I grew up, we started life in a trailer park, right? Now we're in a nice middle-class neighborhood. And so my mom's horrified. So she tracks me down, and I've got her red wagon that she does yard work with, and it's got all these rocks laid out into it. And she's like, "Gabriel, what on earth are you doing? You can't steal rocks from these people and sell them back to them." And I was like, no, you don't understand. I've spent hours going through their landscaping and finding fossils and geodes and all the really good rocks that are just laying in their yard that they don't even know are there. And I've cleaned them all up, and I'm giving them back to them at a price. And I said, it's a service business. It wasn't a product business. It was a service business. And
at 8 years old.
At 8 years old. So I think my mom knew that I was destined for trouble. And then I was the kid that, would take apart the, $1,000 VCR. Because you remember how expensive those things were back.
Yeah.
I would take stuff apart and I'd make new things out of it. And so anyways, that was kind of my curiosity with electronics. And
that's incredible.
And so then fast forward, I got into computers, I got into programming and things like that. And a friend and I got together and built a nice little business around, it was still kind of centered around the industrial industry, but we were building custom software applications and custom software programs to take systems inside of a manufacturing environment and like move them to the cloud, right? And move them to the internet, which is table stakes today. But back when we started doing that, it was really revolutionary for these companies. And so that was really kind of the first big leap that I took. And I was fortunate. We sold that company in 2015.
Nice. Yeah.
And I hung around for about a year as we transitioned our team and our customers. And then I had always just kind of been having this recurring dream about what would eventually become MakUSafe. And I just remember waking up. It was a morning, I think, late October, early November of 2015. And I looked over at my wife, and we were laying in bed, and she goes, you need to quit the job. So I had transitioned. I was fully moved over to this new company. I was working within this new company, and I think she knew before I knew that I needed to go and pursue this. Yeah. And moving into the technology side of it, it was simple. I wanted to, growing up in the Midwest, you know what it's like. we don't go run for cover when the tornado sirens go off because we're surprised. We already knew that there was risk present, and it's because of 100+ years worth of data gathering.
Right.
And now the weatherman gets on Monday and says, hey, if you're going to be outside on Friday, pack an umbrella or watch the sky, or, be careful because there's likely risk present of tornadic activity. And so the idea became, what are the conditions and factors that a worker experiences that are unique and individual to that worker? And we'll talk a little bit about that. And where can we gather the data that will help us understand when risk is beginning to rise, right? And because an accident is the worst evidence that risk was present.
Sure.
Right. So all of that risk built up, then there's an accident of some kind. And so the thought was, if we could take a piece of technology that could look outward from the worker, that could look at their environment around them, and we're looking at things like temperature and humidity and air quality and sound and lighting and VOCs and CO2, all of these things that are present around a worker while they do their job, and they're constantly changing, right? And if we can look at these things and measure them and begin to understand the patterns within them that can result in higher risk, then we can intervene before we reach that ultimate worst result of an accident. And so it was important that we did two things with MakUSafe. One is gather a lot of data and get it up to the cloud in real time, right? The other thing that was unique about this was, and there was nothing at the time when we started that was doing anything like this, was we wanted it on the individual worker. And Doug, from your years of experience of being on job sites, you and I could be working an 8-hour shift this far away from each other. And this isn't a table. This is a machine between us. The exhaust is coming off at you. The sound is coming off at me. At the end of the day, what we experienced was unique to us. It was completely different.
Yes, absolutely.
And so the thought was, if we can get that down to the individual worker level, we can get much more prescriptive in the way that we address things and who we address things with. Gone are the days of, hey, today is, fire safety month. Open your binder. We're going to talk about that.
Thank God.
We now can go, hey, Doug's flagging on here is high risk for repetitive motion injury. The data is telling us that. Let's go talk to Doug and see what he's doing and see if we can find a better way to do that job. Right.
Yes.
So that was really kind of the impetus of it. And
it's remarkable.
How we got started.
It's truly remarkable. And you mentioned two things there, two pieces. There is the wearable technology that is gathering the data, the sensors, the monitors, accelerometers, whatever is found in that tiny little device. And then the cloud, the algorithm, make you smart, I believe you referred to it as. And so it is actually crunching the data and learning from the data. I mean, is this artificial intelligence to some degree? I mean, is it actually?
It is. Yeah. When I was thinking about it, I love my father, but he was never a technologist. Right. And so a lot of professionals, no matter what they do, aren't necessarily people that are savvy with technology. And so the thought of putting a whole bunch of data in front of a guy like my dad and saying, hey, here's all the data.
Yeah.
Go find the problem didn't make a lot of sense. And so that's when we realized, we can employ machine learning to process that data, can look for trends with a group of workers, with an individual worker, with an area of a job site. How are things trending? How did it compare to previous times? And things like that. And, machines are really good at crunching all of that data. And then what comes out of it is, hey, if you've got an hour to spend out on the floor, here's where you need to go. And here's where you can spend your time that is going to make the most impact, because these people are at risk, or this area is having issues, or these things might be a sign that there's something else underlying. Go look at those things. And so really what it helps the safety professional do, and operations professionals and other leadership, is be more effective with the little time that they get in a workday to actually go out and enact change based on information derived from real data.
This is fascinating. And so, and this is incredibly timely, because about 3 weeks ago, the YouTube algorithm fed me a safety podcast. Normally it feeds me other stuff, I have to admit, but I must have Googled or searched something related to safety in a moment of weakness or desperation. Perhaps I was giving a presentation or something. but it fed me a YouTube video from a guy named Sidney Decker.
Yeah.
You know, Sidney Decker, Todd Conklin,
Dr. Conklin, yeah.
these guys that are all they're academics, and they are proponents of this, what they refer to as safety done differently, this new approach to safety.
Yeah.
And I'm a traditional safety guy. You know, they would refer to me as safety one, just like you described. You have an accident, you investigate it, you implement some corrective actions, and you hope that it doesn't happen again. Then you chase the next accident. As an OSHA person, that's what I did for 20 years. And as a safety professional before that, same thing. Their approach is much different. And it is, most of what we do actually is successful. Very rarely do we have these failures that our system can't contain, you know, outside the tolerances of our system.
Yeah.
And so the data that so they refer to this as, you know, work as envisioned versus work as done. And when you design a system, here's how you imagine it. It's going to perform.
Mm-hmm.
And then, as we both know, you go out into the plant and employees adapt to whatever they're confronted with, and they make it work. And so work as done is different than work as intended. And your system collects all that data about how work is successful. And you can learn from that data. When things are going well for us, when we're being productive, when we're being safe, when our quality is good, we have a data set, or we have multiple data sets that are indicative of success. And we can see, of course, where we have had some type of deviation, and maybe
Mm-hmm.
we have a near miss, or maybe we have an accident or something.
Mm-hmm.
And we can see what the data looks like prior to that, the precursors of that, and what that looks like. And so, I mean, everything that they've described is going to be under within the capabilities of your system. And as I was thinking about this, I've always been impressed with the system, and I've spoken with Tom on a number of occasions.
Sure.
I love the way it's going. I'm a dinosaur, and I know this is the future. But as I was listening to these guys, these academics, and thinking about your system, they are perfectly married to be able to generate from what we know to be successful data to what we fear might be some kind of a deviation and an incident data, and to use that as an antecedent to know when to intervene. And just like you said, you know, when I go out onto the floor to watch employees work, I don't know what I'm looking for.
Mm-hmm.
I'm out there. I mean, I have some experience in the field.
You've got your code book, right?
I've got a code book,
and,
exactly.
And you're out there looking for
that's a violation.
Spindle that's got something too long on it.
Exactly,
and,
something that
saw guard missing.
Yeah, it's not going to hurt anybody in all likelihood, in all probability.
Not. Yeah.
So to be able to direct that time, as you've said, this is huge. I don't know if you've had any time to speak with these guys.
They're on our radar, and in fact, I think Tom from our team has been
reaching out
to them,
guys.
And we've got our conference coming up in September over in Des Moines, and I think they'd be a great addition if we can make it work.
Yeah, if you can get some of the Todd or Sydney or the Eric Hallnagel or all of these guys that are involved in this safety 2, which is basically, you know, tracking success. It's trying to mimic success.
It's people centric. It's human.
Absolutely.
It is such a mind shift for that space. And I want to track back to something you said a little bit ago that I think is the power behind why this is able to work. And so, as a safety professional, your primary job is to identify a hazard, determine exposure, apply controls, wash, rinse, repeat.
Yes.
Right. And at the end of the day, how did you ever know if your controls were successful, if they were good? Your only measurement was, oh, great, nobody else got hurt doing that thing. And we all know that could be a product of good luck. It could be,
absolutely.
Who knows? But now we have not only this rich set of data that, you know, we're monitoring things that people can actually be harmed by, right? So high heat exposure, you know, air quality issues. People can actually get injured from that stuff. Noise exposure, right? They can damage their hearing. So it's important that we measure that stuff so that we can intervene at the time. But we're also gathering a lot of contextual data that's going to tell us over time when these magic confluences of factors come together, we see a heightened level of risk. And so when we begin to understand that, that's when we can do the weather forecasting side of things, where we can do the early warning, where we can say, hey, we know at 62% humidity and 78 degrees in the shipping and receiving department, we see a 33% increase in slips and falls, right? Probably condensation. That's the condensation point for that area. We now know that. We have the data. And many of these facilities, they got smart air handling systems. They got all this stuff. We can just automate that out, right? The system can know, hey, if I sense that it's, at whatever percent humidity and whatever percent or whatever temperature, we're just going to go ahead and turn that on automatically. So we never hit that risk threshold, right? That's one power of the data. The other power of the data is understanding how effective are we with our control measures, right? And we even have some customers. It's been really interesting to see where they'll have two groups of people that do the exact same work, and they're experiencing maybe some fears about MSDs or motion injuries. And they decide, hey, we're going to apply a couple of different controls. And you can immediately see from the data, both controls were effective, right? They both helped mitigate that risk. But this control over here was significantly more effective. That will be our best practice as a company going forward. But we don't know that if our only measurement is, did anybody else get injured?
Have an accident.
Right. And
totally.
so the power of this data allows us to understand the efficacy of our actions. And what I think is great about that is, over time, as a safety community, we're effectively crowdsourcing the best remediation actions. And so we can become a knowledge center for people too, especially that new safety professional. So in our platform, when they see that risk has been identified, today we provide some suggested remediation actions for them. And we refine that list over time as we see what's more effective.
Wow.
So that's the power of data.
Huge. And yes. And typically, in the old safety one, the old way, you don't have a lot of data. I mean, we used to refer to doing trend analysis from OSHA 300 logs where there were 5 entries. And I saw 2 lacerations. So we do have a trend. Well, I took enough statistics to know these aren't significant. These are, it's almost worthless information to some extent, and it's probably misleading to some degree. We're focusing on things that probably aren't the most consequential in our work environments because we're not getting enough data to reveal those things. One of the things that you said a moment ago about the individual nuances of work, that's another thing. When I go out now and I do observations in a work environment, I'm looking at maybe a work environment as a whole, and what are they doing? Where are the potential catastrophic exposures, things that could really go bad and hurt someone? But when you have individual data like that, and I know from my experience, I'm an industrial hygienist by training, and so I've done lots and lots of air and noise and radiation monitoring over the years, things like that. And I can sample 10 different welders doing the exact same work and have significantly different exposures based on their body position and how they address their work, training deficiencies perhaps, or just anatomical challenges. Whatever that might be. And so to be able to look at data and say we are approaching, that significant exposure or the repetitions or things like that, where, wow, during a normal work week, our individuals engage in that movement 5,000 times, and Doug's already at 12,000. He's going to destroy himself in some fashion. I think I just love the idea, particularly from an industrial hygiene standpoint, of having more data and real-time data. Because as a pump hanger, I get 8 hours of data once a year, and we make decisions from that. And it's just a horrible way to make those decisions.
And applying this kind of new methodology of human-centric, people-centric safety, typically when a job is designed, we don't design it for an infinite number of body types,
of course,
an infinite number of physical capabilities, right? We take a 6 foot, 180-pound person, we have them do this job a few times, right? And that's how we write the job role and the job process, right? And then what you find out from the data is, hey, we've got 10 people that are all doing the same job, and they all have relatively the same output. So they're all, doing a good job as far as productivity.
Mhm.
But we've got this one person that is so much higher in physical force doing
Right.
this job. Right now we have the clue. We know who we need to go look
Mhm.
at, and so we've zeroed in on that. And then you go do an observation, you realize this person is 5'4".
Mhm.
Right. And they're doing the work up here that everybody else is able to do down here. That person is the one that's at risk. Right.
Right.
And injuries happen sometimes in an instant. Right. But a lot of the stuff, especially stuff that ruins people's lives, is cumulative trauma.
Absolutely.
It's
Mhm.
that guy did that for 25 years. Right. Now his shoulders are shot.
Mhm.
He's going to retire. He's not going to be able to play golf like he wanted to. He won't be able to pick his grandkids up. Right.
Right.
And the data was there to tell us that this was likely to happen. Right.
Mhm.
And so it gives us this powerful insight into, finding that needle in the haystack when you're typically, to your point, looking at an entire job site or
Right.
an entire job role within a job site. So the
Right.
ability to zero in on that and be able to enact change, I think is incredibly powerful.
I do too. That is remarkable. I think, and I'm not a thinker, but it seems like there are a lot of applications beyond simply um, projecting potential safety issues for this technology. I have a friend, one of the sponsors of the podcast. She's an occupational therapist, and she develops work capacity projections for different job activities. And so when people want to do post offer, pre employment physicals or something,
Sure.
or physical capacity testing, she will go observe the work and develop those specifically for those jobs. This kind of data could really be useful in developing physical capacity standards for work activities, knowing who's capable of doing it, who is not. I mean, I think
Well, and what are the conditions?
the applications are just limitless.
Sorry to jump on you there,
Yeah,
Doug,
okay.
but again, when we do a lot of these things, we're doing it in a static environment, right? And we know today OSHA is heavily focused on heat stress. It's going to be 100 degrees plus again starting this weekend here in the Midwest, right?
Right.
The physical capacity of a worker as the job was designed in whatever physical therapy office or whatever lab, or maybe even on the job site, it wasn't done in those conditions.
Mhm.
Right.
That's
And
a
so
great
we
point.
don't understand what change has to happen necessarily, or what expectations we have to change on what the actual capacity is of that job under ever changing conditions.
Mhm.
And it's not just heat. I mean, it's always changing,
Mhm. Always. That's
So
fantastic.
I
That's
think
a great point.
I think that's
That's
the
a great
beauty of
point.
gathering data, whether it's, technology like MakUSafe or just gathering data from the worksite environment. Is it's organic. That's
Mhm.
why it's an environment. It's constantly changing.
Mhm.
And if you're not considering those factors, one of my pet peeves, and you talk about it on this podcast too, is, when a safety manager is like, I got an idiot that just always causes accidents, right? Or this guy's
Right.
a moron. He's a walking accident kind of thing. People will do things differently than they've ever done under certain circumstances. So you might have somebody that does the job right all the time, but they've never done it in 104 degree
Yeah, change the
heat,
context
right?
in their behaviors.
And now all of a sudden, taking that shortcut seems pretty convenient, because if I can take that shortcut, now I can get to the cooling center quicker, or now I can get to my break quicker, or whatever the case may be. And so you have to factor all of those things in when you're thinking about what led to that. And I appreciated, it was on a recent episode of yours where just talking about that not being the fault of the person. We should really look at it and go, instead of just blaming the person for taking that shortcut,
Right.
we really need to look broader than that and say, what
Absolutely.
in the entire system failed, right? It was a culture problem. It was a leadership problem. It was a control problem. It was an engineering problem. It was a system problem. There are other factors. It's really, really easy, and it's really, really cheap to just blame it on the worker and walk away. And I feel like that's changing, and I appreciate seeing that change.
That's exactly what this group of academics that I've been reading. I think I've purchased about 12 books from Amazon over the last week or two, because, it's that light bulb moment. And again, I have been doing this for a long, long time under the old tenets, under the old processes, and always had some consternation about, I hate blaming the employee. In fact, I hate blaming the employer oftentimes. Assigning blame doesn't really help the process. Just, doing the observations and the analysis, learning. I mean, that's the intent rather than just blaming. But I think you're right. I think what your comment about the context changes behaviors is one of the things that these guys talk about. Error is normal. Employees are going to make mistakes every day. Good employees, bad employees, they will all make mistakes. And do our systems have the capacity to tolerate that without some significant outcome?
Yeah. Well, if people were perfect, we wouldn't be having a podcast episode today.
We wouldn't need to do this. Right? Absolutely.
So recognizing that and accepting that and not using that as your excuse for why something failed makes all the sense in the world. And that's the only way you're actually going to make the situation better, is when you remove that. Now, I get it. That person bypassed the safety gate and walked into the machine while it was running because they thought they could grab their hat really quick, or whatever the case may be, right? That wasn't smart. But what allowed that to happen? Right? What in the culture of that workplace let that person in their mind think, this is acceptable, right? That's where I would start. Right. That's the first layer of the onion that I would peel back. I wouldn't even start looking at why don't we have a locking mechanism on that cage and things like that? You just lifted a latch. There should be a padlock on there. Okay, let's start at the top, right? What in our culture allowed this to happen?
Yeah.
Because when there's a culture of accountability, and you that when you walk on a job site, and many of our customers have fantastic safety culture, which you think would be counterintuitive, because they're like, well, why would they invest in safety technology if they're already doing really well? And it's because they care. It's because they're doing well, and they always want to do better, right? And they always want to be at the forefront of improving things. And so those are the organizations that you feel that culture. And oftentimes when we see accidents happen, the first thing that you notice is a lack of that culture.
Yeah, of course. So I don't typically pre-plan questions, but one of the things I was thinking about asking was, who is the company that you're looking for? Who is the company that will be attracted to this technology? And I think you described it. It's not a particular industry. This is something that all types of industries could use: construction and manufacturing, and you name it, healthcare, mining, food, whatever that is.
Yeah.
But there's a certain mindset to the company that is going to use your product.
Yeah.
I would assume at this point.
Yeah. I think part of it is culture, and we've gotten better too of I would say qualifying our customers, right? I heard some of these things in the early days from prospects of, oh, I can't wait to get these on workers. I got a couple of guys that I know are my problem people, right? And now I'm going to have the hard evidence to prove it, right?
Right.
And that already lets us know we're set up for failure. But I mean, stepping back to the start of the company, one of the first questions I asked before I even, started doing any work as far as building technology was, I talked to factory owners. I mentioned I had a software company. I worked in the industrial space. So I had a lot of contacts. So I started reaching out to the owners and to the safety managers. And I said, do you want to know this? Right? Do you want this data? Because if you know, you need to take action, right? It's going to show you some things that are going to surprise you, right? I thought that would be the case, and it's proven to be the case, right? Within hours, certainly days, we're seeing things that they had no idea were there. The reality is those things were always there. And that's what I heard from the organizations that I feel like get it and have a really good culture. The owners would say to me, I want to know, right? Because the reality is it's already there. I just don't know that it's there. Can't do something about something I don't know, right? So if I can find it, I'll do something about it. And the reality is they're liable anyways, right? So either you get the information and you're able to do something about it proactively, which shows a great deal of faith and effort. You know, if you ever end up having an accident where you do have to go to court and they start questioning your safety culture, your safety processes, and you can say, we invest in this, we do this, this is how we approach this, we track this, all of these things, right? Things are still going to happen. Accidents, unfortunately, are still going to happen, right? But now you have all of this evidence of what you're doing as an organization to make it better.
Right.
And that's what those owners told me. So we're going to be responsible for it anyways, but I'd rather prevent it than be responsible for it. So that was the motivation that I needed to hear, because again, I thought, wow, plausible deniability would be great. Like, hey, sorry, we didn't know it sucked to work here.
Exactly.
You know, our turnover rate's, 85%, but you know,
everybody loves us.
Yeah, exactly. The 15% that stick around, man, they sure.
But that is a certain type of company that wants to know that.
Yeah.
Because, that is another challenge that I see all the time in safety is, or working in this safety world, is that people don't always want to know that. And sometimes, often, the spotlight shines back on you as the leader or the owner or something. And that's not always easy, Well, because that whole thing that you just described of, there's no value in blaming the employee for a behavior that led to an error, because we know they're going to make errors.
Yeah.
And we know they're going to be non-compliant. So anytime you do an incident investigation, you might as well start knowing that the employee made a mistake, there was an error involved, and it probably involves some kind of non-compliance with one of our cornerstone procedures that we thought was appropriate, but we don't know that. And when we realize that oftentimes our systems or procedures are bad or lacking, or our training is bad or lacking, or whatever that might be, that's hard to take sometimes. So it takes a company that really cares about their employees and wants to learn and improve to benefit from that information.
Yeah. And to the point earlier too, is sometimes the procedure or the policy that they wrote made sense because something happened, and coming out of it, really smart people thought, hey, this is the way that we should mitigate this risk. Right. But they didn't have data to know whether it was effective or not. Right. So maybe even the policy itself wasn't broken. Maybe the policy just failed that employee.
Right.
Right. But they didn't know because they had no way of measuring that.
Yeah, that really is a huge strength of this. So when you started all this was probably, you've been doing this for about 5 or 6 years now. Is that right?
About 6 years, about 6 years ago.
And so I love the fact that you went out and asked these businesses, first of all, if they would even want the data, and then what data probably, and how are we best going to capture this data? I mean, you could have set little monitors all over the facility, probably, and fixed, but that doesn't.
That was actually the first idea, Doug.
Give you useful information, at least not as useful, perhaps.
That was I think, a big turning point. Originally, I had this vision for sensor clusters, as I call them, right, and just stationary sensor clusters around. And the more and more I spent time on job sites and talking to these owners, I realized that point I made earlier about it's so unique. It's individual. That experience that day for every single one of the 4,000 workers that was on that job site that day was completely unique to them.
Yeah.
And a monitor 100 yards away isn't going to accurately represent what the temperature and humidity is right here where I'm working. Right. And so that was the aha moment of, oh my gosh, if we could make this thing wearable, then it becomes portable and it'll go wherever the worker goes. Right. And that will give us really, really rich data to understand what the individual person is being exposed to.
Yeah.
So
what challenges have you found with implementation? As you have, you work with some of my clients and some of my friends' companies, and one of the companies, I'm sure it's, well, what the hell? White's company, for example, Aaron Anderson, one of their safety leaders is a friend of mine. And in my opinion, one of the most innovative safety people that I've ever worked with. Yeah. And they seem to really love the device, the technology and the information. And I would imagine there are people who are going to be listening who would not have thought this would be really applicable to construction, but it's absolutely applicable to construction. But what were some of the pushback that you got when you were introducing this to companies? I mean,
well, I mean, first of all, by nature, human beings don't like change, right? And so
of course.
you introduce any sort of change on a job site, you immediately know you're going to have employees that don't like it, right? Then you go back to my earlier comment where you've got organizations that are looking at it from a punitive standpoint. Oh, how do I get the data so that I can go after people, right? And we know that that's a recipe for failure. We won't even do projects with companies like that if we hear that. And so there's always that initial hesitancy. There's also a lack of understanding right now, I think, across the industry of what can I have my employees, or what can I make them do, right? Is this PPE? Is this a Big Brother? Is this like cameras? Like where does this fall? And the verdict is still out on a lot of this stuff. And I think I can make arguments for and against every single one of them, right?
Sure.
You know, PPE that's the last line of defense, right? Well, this certainly isn't the last line of defense, right? This is supposed to be way out in front.
To be, this is more of an engineering control practically.
It is. And so, does it fall under PPE? But, fortunately, OSHA provides business owners the ability to put in place the mechanisms, measures, and tools to implement safety as they see fit, if they understand that there's hazards present, right? And so this would fall under that purview, right? That this is something that an organization can tell their employees, this is it. This is our new program. And we recognize that was going to be an important part to success for us from the beginning, which is why we intentionally don't do a couple of things. You said we do a lot, which we do. And there's a lot of sensor technology. There's a lot of things in there, but there's a few things that we intentionally don't do. One of which is we're not looking inward at the worker. We're not looking at biometrics. We're not looking at heart rate or physiology, skin moisture, body temperature, any of that kind of stuff. And the reality is I can't control that anyways. Right. As a business owner, I really can't control, especially the health decisions that employees make. We can encourage, we can, apply gentle pressure and guidance and things like that. But at the end of the day, we really can't do a lot to do that. What we can do is we can impact the physicality of the job. We can impact the types of tools that we provide for making that job easier for them. We can alter the environment. We can identify when we need to rotate people based on environmental data. Absolutely. All of these things, right? And so I think that becomes the kind of the cornerstone of getting this started. And again, you'll always have employees that are apprehensive, but the organizations that have come out and said, look, we understand, we promise to you, we're making a commitment and a promise to you. And we're always on site for launch on day one, right? And we're there to answer questions. We show them the dashboard. Here's what your leadership is getting. We encourage them to be transparent with the dashboard, show it to the people, put it on the break room, right? But leadership makes a commitment. We're not going to use this for punitive action against anybody, because the reality is we recognize as an organization that there are risks here that we don't see, that are already here, that are happening today, that we don't see, that we don't understand, that we haven't identified. And we don't want to wait for an accident to happen before we take action on it. So that's why we're doing this. And we're going to use this data to do positive change. And we found some really good examples where something will show up in the data, and you've got a really solid safety leader that goes out there, shows the individual, look, you're working 400% more physically harder than everybody else that does this job. We appreciate the hard work, right? But this isn't sustainable for you long term. Right. We want you here for as long as you want to be in this career with us. And maybe that's another 20, 30 years. This isn't going to happen for 20 or 30 years if you're 4 times more physical than everybody else. We brought an ergonomist in. We want to just do some observation and see if we can make it better. Or do you have any ideas on why you're exerting that kind of physical energy, right? And the power of collaborating with the employee builds upon that culture.
Kind of a learning teams approach where the employees are involved in problem solving.
It is. Well, I mentioned that there's 2 things, right? So that was the biometric, and we stay away from all this sticky personal health stuff. And there's still questions around legality, right? Can I record my employee's body temperature? Can I employ, this is personal health data. What do I have to do with it? How do I protect it? So all that stuff is aside. The other thing that I think is really important, and there's 2 schools of thought out there on this, and I'll give both sides, right? So I can be fair, but I firmly believe in where we stand on this, but we did not want to introduce negative feedback into the process of using the technology. And what I mean by that is we don't buzz, beep, alarm, shock, do anything to the worker that says you did something wrong from a device, right? And my original thought behind this was, if you've ever had a dog, right? And if the dog's barking, people buy these shock collars and they put a shock collar on a dog, the dog stops barking, right? But every time you pull that collar out, what does the dog do? Puts its tail between its legs and runs away, right?
Yeah.
And so if you're negatively stimulating that worker, they now associate the technology with negativity, right? For one, so we're already losing the battle there.
Right.
And the other thing that happens is you're an industrial hygienist by trade. There's ergonomists out there by trade. There's safety professionals who have spent their career understanding how to mitigate risk and hazard. And now you're putting all of that onus back on the employee because they're out there and they just did something. And now the system buzzed and they're going, I'm just doing my darn job.
Right.
I've been doing this
out the door.
I've been doing this for 20 years. Then they put this thing on me and I pick up a box and I go, right? What am I supposed to do? Right. And they're not an ergonomist. They're just doing what they're supposed to do. And so our belief was it's important to know that something potentially hazardous happened or that somebody was exposed to something that's potentially hazardous, right? Or they're overexerting or working too hard. But let's get that information to leadership immediately through a notification, right? So that thing happens, somebody, repetitive motion, whatever it is, a slip, a trip, let's get that information to leadership. They now have not only that incident, but they have all this contextual data. Where are they at? What's the environmental conditions? How long have they been on shift? All of these kinds of things that they can see, and they can go out and have a real conversation with that person. And that's a lot more powerful than just slapping a box on somebody's belt and buzzing them every time they pick up a box.
Interesting.
So,
but obviously there were some employers who were interested in that.
There are.
Since it has become a debate of sorts, or at least you've taken a position on it.
Yeah.
So some wanted to be able to zap them.
So that's the other side of things. Immediate response, right? And the philosophy behind immediate response is if we can provide an immediate response at the moment something happened, we can train somebody better, right? I get that. And they do get immediate response, right? That person is going to do something different, right? Because what they were doing was causing it to buzz, right? Or to flash or alert or something like that. But how do you know what they're doing differently is better?
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
That's where, again, I feel like from everything we try to do, Doug, when we think about the features of our product and the technology is we always ask ourselves, why is this important to the worker? We started from the worker level and built our philosophy outward. And I think that's important all the way to, I'm not a safety person, but I've done my best to try to get educated. I went on and became a certified occupational safety specialist. I saw that, man. So cost certified.
That's
so
cool.
It's nowhere near a CSP or anything. And I don't want to by any means put myself on a standard with many of those professionals that have gone through all of that kind of training. But we invest in cost training for all of our business facing people. So all of our salespeople, all of our customer service people, account managers, even our product developers, the people that do design for our company are cost certified. And we did that because how can they build the best product and provide the best experience for a customer if they have no idea how to empathize with that person? They have no idea what that safety professional is doing day in and day out, the challenges that they're facing. If we can't even know just a fraction of that, and again, we're cross certified, it's a fraction of somebody's career, right? But if we can't even speak on the same level,
say just the vernacular, the vocabulary,
it's world changing.
Absolutely
for us.
I didn't know that.
But
That's fantastic.
It's because we care. It's all about that worker, right? And how do we improve outcomes for that worker? Everybody wins when we do that, right? The worker wins, they go home safely to their family. And I got a cool story here about somebody that did, but they go home to their family. The employer gets an employee that can come back to work the next day, right? They're usually safety done right is productivity, right? No longer do we have this garbage philosophy of, well, if I want to work safe, I'm going to sacrifice productivity. Or if I want to have productivity, I need to sacrifice safety. We're realizing there's so many synergies between those two things. It just, that I think that myth has now been debunked, right? So if everything we do starts with that employee, then everybody wins, except for the what's like Bender and Bender guy, the accident injury lawyer on TV.
Right,
you know,
right.
he gets less calls, so he loses. But I don't think anybody.
Okay. He's doing all
he's,
right.
he's all right.
He's got plenty.
So yeah,
it's interesting. One of the things that you mentioned, this adaptability, the employees, if they get zapped, if they were getting that negative feedback, they would adapt the job in order not to get zapped, with no real certainty that it's better, that it's safer, healthier, more productive. You just adapt. And so one of the concepts, again, that I've been reading, my entire philosophy of safety has changed in the last 2 weeks. But one of the things they refer to is this guided adaptability. And with that data, and then the opportunity to go and interact with the employees, you have an opportunity to guide in a desirable direction that adaptability, rather than just force them to adapt in some way.
100%. And, you know, we focused a lot on how the data helps us find the problems. Some of the coolest stories that have come out of the work we've done with our technology is where you've got an organization that maybe has 100 locations, and they all do the same thing all over the world, right? So they've got it on a handful of locations, and they go, hey, this job role, let's just say loader, unloader, whatever, job role, it's the same at every location. This location over here is showing an 800% less physicality, right? They're producing less energy. They're experiencing less G-forces. They all have the same output, right? Yeah, this one over here is 300% higher, right? But I'm going to go focus on this one here that's lower. And what they find is they go and they realize, Gary welded himself his own fixture that flips the thing over so he doesn't have to flip it over himself. And they go, oh my gosh, we could build 100 of these things, put them in every facility, and we could lower the physicality risk across the entire organization, right? So it's not always about just uncovering where the likelihood of problems may be or where the risk is present, but let's find out where people have adapted.
Yeah, these highly efficient teams. What are they doing differently?
You talk about it all the time. Human beings adapt to work. They'll adapt to the environment. We've got great examples of that. And I always joke like the I Love Lucy episode of, when
the chocolate's coming down
and they adapt. They just start shoving them in their mouth, right? They're not going out the end anymore.
Pockets, mouth.
Exactly,
Classic.
right? They adapt.
It's true.
We've got organizations in food production, right, where they've got conveyor systems and they're doing, meat and other types of food production. And, when workers leave and they go on their break or they move to a different location or whatever, and that belt speed doesn't change, right? They start working faster. They adapt to that. And that is where the risk starts to rise. And that's when accidents start to happen.
So can you tie then? So you could tie that the belt speed, the line speed into the feedback that you're getting from the devices in some fashion then, or something like that.
Yeah. What's beautiful about having wearable technology is, we talk a lot about industry 4.0, factory 4.0, the connected factory, all of that kind of stuff. Well, they talk about connected factory, but where's the worker in all of this equation, right? We've got smart air handling systems. We've got smart machines, smart fork trucks. We got access control. We got machine shutoffs. We've got all of these things that are smart, but then we just left the worker out of it, right? To just interact in this smart world, right? But now our customers their equipment is able to see people because they have a device on them now, and they can recognize how many people are there. We could automate the speed of that production line based on how many people are there in real time, right? So they never have to start shoving meat in their mouth. Right?
Yep, absolutely.
But you know what I mean, right? Yes. We can, make doors open for people. I see a future too. We're not doing this with any customers today, but we're having conversations where if I approach a machine and as I'm walking up, the machine already knows I'm Gabriel Glynn. The machine checks the cloud and says he's authorized to use me, checks the training log. His training is up to date. I'm going to go ahead and unlock. So the moment I step up there, it's ready to go. I do what I'm doing on that machine. Everything that I produce during the time I'm there is tied to me in the cloud because it knows exactly when I was there. It knows exactly who was using it, right? And then I walk away and it can put itself into a state of waiting for the next person to come. That's powerful.
Well, it's kind of like the two buttons on the driver's side of my car where my wife's adjustment and my adjustment. And you get in and you push, my wife is 5'4", and so we need a different setting for the car seat.
Yeah.
And the machines are the same way
adapt.
from an ergonomic standpoint. If the machine can adjust to you based on your presence as you approach the machine,
Yeah.
those are remarkable things. I was going to ask you what are you working on right now? But these are, I mean, I don't have the brain power to even conceive of the different directions you could go with this. I mean, it just seems like that 4.0, the workplace 4.0, as you're describing, though, has to include a component of the employee.
It absolutely does. Yeah. And we can't leave them out. And I get it. We're actually one of our earliest investors is a industrial automation company. We're located inside of their headquarters. So they've got warehouse and production facility and everything. And they were very, very kind and gave us really cheap rent. And so I get it. Like factory automation is happening, but it's not replacing jobs, right? It's replacing vacancies right now.
Yeah.
And there's still so many more vacancies, right? And there's only so much at this stage of human civilization. There's only so much that a robot can do. I know I do this all the time. I'll tell Siri to do something, and it'll be like, "I'm sorry, I don't understand." I'm like, "I just gave you the simplest command,
right?
Just call my mom." And then it's like, "Calling Gary," and you're like, right. "I said my mom," you know. Yeah. So, anyways, the robots aren't going to take over the world yet, right? We got time. Maybe our kids or something can worry about that, but. So today, if we can get human to connected factory, woven together, that becomes really powerful from a productivity standpoint, from a job improvement standpoint. And the reality is the good workers, the ones that stick around and want to build a career around it, they want to go in and be productive. They want to go in, do a great job, feel fulfilled in the work that they did, and go home to their family at the end of the day. Right?
Yeah, I believe so too.
So
it's incredible. It's like blowing my mind. This, in addition to what I've been reading the last few weeks, I'm going to have to take a retreat.
Where are we at?
I don't. What time is it? We're doing pretty
10.
good.
We're
is it almost 10 o'clock?
Yeah.
Well, you brought. That's you, I would assume, on the cover of that magazine.
Yeah, it's Smart Manufacturing.
That's awesome.
Magazine. So, so it's interesting.
And the picture is of whom?
Yeah. So a really quick story, but just, the philosophical conversations you've had, just in the last few episodes, one, just yourself kind of reflecting on the book reading and a great conversation with Jim. Now I want to go to the Amazon. Don't want to eat grubs, but or drink spit, I know I'm in no physical shape to go do what he talked about on that. But, anyways, the philosophical side of things, it's interesting. I think sometimes people find their purpose. They and Jim talked about Abby, right? I think was the gal's name that came through safety, and that was her calling, right?
Yep.
So I felt a really strong calling to this. I've been having dreams about it, been praying about it a lot, and decided to take that leap, leave the company, walk away from the business we had just sold, and start this. And a couple years into it, my grandmother wrote an article for the Cedar Rapids Gazette, and I happened to read it, and it was about this man on the cover. So this gentleman walked out of a factory in Cedar Rapids, and it was just moments before the factory exploded. Let's see if I can find the photos here without. This is great radio, by the way, as I'm flipping through. The people on TV
you're good.
You're good, are getting it. Anyways, the factory explodes and takes the lives of all of his coworkers.
But he survives.
And he survived because he decided he was going to take his lunch break that day and walked out of the factory. They lived on the job site. Back in the day, a lot of people couldn't afford vehicles and things like that, factory workers. So he stayed in an apartment on the job site, walked out to have lunch. Factory explodes. All of the coworkers pass away. Getting to it here.
Gosh.
And I wouldn't be sitting here with you today.
This was your grandfather?
It's my great grandfather.
No shit.
John Griffin. And if he wouldn't have decided to take that lunch break with my great grandmother, I wouldn't even be hanging out. Oh, there it is. My God. Look at that. That's what.
And this was in Cedar Rapids,
Iowa. Douglas Starch Works factory. That's what's. I don't know if it'll show up very well on there, but that was incredible. And so when I read
that's not coincidence.
No, when I read that story, I reached out to my grandmother and I went back to Cedar Rapids and I sat down and visited with her. And she's been one of my biggest cheerleaders. She understands exactly what we're doing. My grandfather, her husband, he passed away just a couple of years ago. He was an engineer at Rockwell Collins radio back in the day. And so they understood acutely what I was trying to do. And when I heard that story, I thought, this is it. This is destiny. This is,
Right.
you know, and we've come a long way. Factories aren't exploding every day, thankfully. Right. But we can do better. And that's all I want to do. I just want to help us find ways to get better, because nobody deserves to have an empty chair at the dinner table.
Right.
And there was, I think, 46 people that had empty chairs.
Remarkable.
You know, so
that's a remarkable story. I'm glad you shared that. Thank you for sharing that. So there is so much here to unpack.
I can hang out with you all day.
Yeah, we could probably do this for hours, and Cam probably left. I think he's gone. We'll have to shut it off ourselves at the end.
Sure.
So people are interested in more information. How do they contact you? MakUSafe.com or what?
Yeah, so MakUSafe.com. So it's actually a little play on words. Maku is Hawaiian for risk. So there's a little hidden meaning in our name, MakUSafe. So we don't spell it Make You Safe. We spell it MakUSafe. So check that out, MakUSafe.com. I would encourage people to check out. We've got a conference coming up where we bring in safety professionals. We bring in operations people from all over the world.
Yeah.
Really, we'll come to Des Moines, Iowa.
I'm going to be there.
And I'm excited to have you there. And I hope we'll showcase the best of Des Moines. And I hope we'll have just really good, robust discussion around the evolution of the safety professional and how things are changing. And we need to be able to keep up for the sake of our people that go to work on job sites every day and roll up their sleeves and do work. We all need to get better. And that's what that conference is about, is getting us all together so that we can make each other better.
And that's how this technology grows and evolves, is through the input that you get from the users and the employees. And
absolutely. Iron sharpens iron. And so the more we can get together and learn from each other, and our customers will share things with at the conference with the group and with us that we've never heard before, ways that they've used data to make improvements, things that they've discovered, other tools or other processes that they're doing that have made a difference. And so it's really just all about getting together, celebrating the worker for a day, spending some time in Des Moines, and just getting to know our peers.
That would be fantastic. So, I would love to see if you could get some of these guys down there too. I call them. They don't answer my calls. If you call, they might actually respond.
Yeah.
But
I think Tom's trying to get Aaron down there too, I think.
Aaron Cerrone, my buddy Aaron. He's one of our leadership guys. And all of this is part leadership is always part of this.
Huge part of
the exploration. I commend you for asking the same questions of your clients that you asked of those original group of manufacturers, you know, because it's sometimes asking the questions involves praise and positive feedback, but sometimes it always involves a little criticism or constructive criticism, hopefully.
Absolutely.
And that's, you know, that's a big deal too. So I commend you for that, because it's not, you know, hopefully you get some good feedback.
We do. Yeah. And it's
the discussion is always fun.
Yeah. Again, it's all about that worker and how do we make it right for them. And we don't have all the answers. And that I didn't spend, 30 years in a career around this stuff. I'm just learning it. Right. And so if we can draw from the knowledge of everybody and make things better, it's going to accelerate things so much more. So
fantastic. Thanks, man.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on.
It has been a treat. And I've been looking forward to this. Last time we had it scheduled, you had to go to Paris or some shit like that. So.
Yeah, I got asked to come speak at a safety conference out there. So that was
awesome?
It was a really cool opportunity. I mean, gorgeous hotel, Paris, can't complain. I have like a zillion points because I travel all over the place for work, and so I brought my wife along.
Oh, good.
And she ran the booth.
Oh, good.
At the event while I did the speaking and that kind of stuff.
I cannot imagine telling my wife I was going to Paris for work and not taking her.
So I told her, I go, it's a work trip, so you got to work if you're coming. And she's like, that's fine. I'll run a booth. I'll do whatever. I go, got it.
Yeah. In fact, I think I'm bringing her to Des Moines. So
awesome.
She historically did not travel with me when I was with OSHA.
Sure.
Because you're in a car and you're going from site to site to site, and my per diem was like $50, and so I couldn't afford to eat if she was along. But she has accompanied me on a few more trips at this stage of my career. So, and Des Moines is a fun town.
It is. We have a beautiful venue picked out. Hopefully, a really, really inspiring and good program, and then just a chance. We always kind of wind up the day with cocktail hour kind of stuff. Sure. So just a chance to mingle.
It's networking.
And
everything is about, knowing people. I know we need to wrap this up, but I do want to, so if we have to cut it off or people are just, changing channels at some point, but tell me, how have you found support for the company when you were out there looking for investors? I mean, did you have to self-fund this in the beginning, or did you find people? Obviously, you said you found a kind of a controls automation company that was interested, or at least believed in you enough to be interested. Yeah. Do you have any trouble now finding support, or do you have plenty of investors now?
Well, depends on where you look for support from. So we've been fortunate to raise over $17 million over the course of 6 years.
Good.
It went from me being chief volunteer officer and my co-founder working nights and weekends while he worked his full-time job at IBM to the two of us coming on full-time. And now we've got 26 people, hopefully soon to be hiring another one next week. And so we've been fortunate to have some very wonderful and forward-thinking people.
Oh, you've got some high-quality people, man.
We've got some great investors, organizations like EMC Insurance. They were one of our earliest investors. I didn't even make the work comp insurance connection to what we were doing. I was focused on guys like my dad, and they reached out to us and said, "You are going to change the world of worker compensation." And I said, "Cool. I have no idea what that means." Tell me. But they've invested multiple times in the company. They've been a great partner.
Fantastic.
They're providing our product to their customers, which is fantastic. So if you're an EMC policy holder, right? And we now work with, more than a dozen insurance companies in that capacity. So it's great that they're on board with that kind of stuff.
That's fantastic.
We have some venture capitalists on our cap table as well, right? So that's been a great experience.
Is my buddy Mark Haysbrook one of those? Dundee Venture Capital?
Not Dundee.
Okay.
Yeah.
He just did a podcast not long ago. He's a really interesting guy, and I'm going to put you guys together because eventually when I retire, I'm going to come to work for you. And so that's probably 10 years down the road. But anyway, man, I know we have to wrap. Cam's over there going, I've got another guy coming in.
Yeah.
It's been fantastic. And I hope we can do it again, maybe in 6 months or something. You can come back in and talk more about what you're doing, or
now that we got kind of the past out of the way. I mean, let's talk about every day is so different for us, and every day something new happens, and it's exciting, and we're learning as we go. So it would be fun to come back, and there's probably things 6 months from now I'll laugh about and go, "Oh, I remember thinking that way 6 months ago, and now we think this way." So
absolutely. I love it. Gabe, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. I hope we can do it again. Thanks everybody for listening. Keep doing what you're doing. This is important work. So keep doing it. As you mentioned, this is just about people. It's all this is. So
appreciate it. Thanks.
Have a great weekend, man.
Yeah.
Thanks, Cam.